it's also hard for some people to deal with people with mental disorders. And many people attempted, for example, if they have like a spouse or a family member like with major depressive disorder, like how one wants to say, hey, pull yourself together, like do something, like, and even you want to say it with love because you want them to feel better, but understanding that, hey, this is their brain. And it's easy for people to and also in the book I talk about the famous case about like damage to the brain when that turns people into a pedophile, or like tumors that then gets extracted and the person is better and then it grows back. People accept those, like when there is a big damage or big tumor, that it changes them, that they somehow don't have as much free will, or that they kind of forgive them certain things. But how about on a lesser scale? It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why small changes, like why tiny concussions like most people have, or in general, every little influence, everything you eat, drink, take medication, everything, run, talk, everything you learn, it all makes your brain. So how and also with mental illness, it's easier said than done. Pull yourself together, and it's not how it works. And it's so I think I hope it can help people understand that it's complex. This complex organ has different, sometimes there are different patterns of aberrations, and that's what psychiatric disorders are. And you can't just like, hey, why don't I build a little bit of gray matter in that area? Like you cannot do
Doesn't
it.
work that way. Yeah, it just doesn't work that way. No, I think it's a great like summation of, because I do think the benefits of it are very real on our day-to-day life. And it's not all that, it's kind of like the scientific view of why like eliminating your ego, or at least trying to control your ego, and like having that better perspective, trying to understand your own insecurities and blind spots and all that. Like in some ways, it's all in that vein. It's trying to get yourself to be kind of as neutral as possible. It's almost Buddhist in some ways as you look at it, to try and just look at it as we're all kind of one and we all view it in this way. And I think even this conversation, the book, the complexity of it, as we've been kind of going through in this conversation, to me, like, and this isn't a spiritual comment, it's as best as I can see it, like it's us as humans like trying to make sense of our existence on the fly. It's like us starting to get glimpses into parts of it that our consciousness allows us to see, that arguably, I don't know if we were never meant to see, or at least it's just at a level in which is not in our comprehension yet. Like starting to make sense of free will, and the way that you're explaining it, it almost doesn't fit into our human existence. Like the same little issues we keep running into, like, but wait, if there's no free will, then how do we know this matters? And it's almost like we can't comprehend it yet. And it just suggests like the complexity and the nuance of the human existence. And this is us trying to make sense of it, and we just fully can't do it. And that's super interesting. And I think like a good example of that is we're illustrating in this conversation is, somebody could say, like you said, with mental illness, like just pull yourself up from your bootstraps. And I could see somebody saying like, but there's got to be some element of that. There's some element of willpower or like resiliency or grit. And again, in the spirit of what we're talking about, it is true that willpower and grit is a thing that allows us to do difficult things. It's just a realization that the source of that willpower and grit wasn't yours. You didn't do anything to earn it. Even if you went to like a really tough boarding school and built discipline, the reason you went to that boarding school was beyond your control. The reason your parents had the idea in their head for you to go there. So you can still have grit and willpower, but still believe free will doesn't exist. And that's complicated. That's the counterintuitiveness you were talking about, right?
Exactly. Especially because willpower and free will even sound similar.
Yes, exactly.
How can we have willpower if we don't have free will?
Yes, so true. So true. So I love it. I love this conversation. Okay. To me, it ultimately comes down to your view of the world, right? I find in doing this show, I'm learning more about myself, that maybe I do have this more nihilistic view of it, which is like, I think if we're being really honest and we take this no free will thing to the extreme, none of this matters. Like none of it, there's no meaning to it. None of it matters. There's no reason to have compassion in the world. I don't want to believe that, and I don't live that way at all. And maybe that's part of that uncomfortableness of diving too deep into it, because it kind of feels like that Nietzsche quote of like, if you look too long into the abyss, it starts looking back at you. That's kind of what I get from this. But
Mhm.
if you kind of put that philosophical big macro view aside, I think everything you're saying and the benefits that it brings to people, I've experienced it myself. I've seen it in others. And most importantly, like logically, it just makes sense that it's true. So I think it's super valuable.